Okay, welcome back to the United Pubcast, the podcast of the Man United Supporters Club here in New South Wales, Australia. Apologies for delay if you are joining us. Just one or two little technical issues, but they are all sorted now, thank God. I have Larry with me as usual, but obviously the special guest you can see at the bottom of your screen is a good friend of the pubcast. And as I've been before, in our sort of podcast days, before we moved over to YouTube, good friend of ours, John Silk, author from over in Germany. So I'll be very interested to get your thoughts on all things sort of Ralf Rangnick at the moment when we dissect that. But before all that, how are you, John? All keeping well?
Yeah, not too bad. I was up late last night, keeping abreast of all the Australia-related diplomatic news, if you like, regarding sport and diplomacy. And then that was the first thing I spoke about this morning as well. So, anyway, I'm good. And it's a good distraction from the goings-on at Old Trafford anyway.
Yeah, well, we definitely do need a few distractions from Old Trafford, but no real escape in them, Larry. I think we're definitely going to have to get into them. But before we get into, obviously, greeting Larry and everyone, there are a few important people in the chat we'll say hi to. So, Josh, good evening, mate. Hope you're keeping well. Ahmad, as always, good to have you here. Both Georges, always good to see you guys here. Sam, member of the Supporters Club. Dion as well, always good to have you. Mike and Rob, who is on It's a Football Thing a little bit later. All good to have you. Join us. This is a tough chat. I think we all sort of come on and sort of hope we're going to chat a United 3-0 win or United win a trophy. But long are those days gone. That's definitely not the case, Larry. Just before we sort of dissect all the little topics in sort of the 17 players unhappy or the players don't want Ralf Rangnick type thing, Larry, just the last couple of days after the Wolves defeat, because that feels like a week ago now, that seems a while away. Just sum up your feelings over the last day or two regarding sort of the outfall at United at the moment.
Yeah, I think with the break in the football calendar, I think it's just been an opportunity to sort of reflect over the last 3 months over what's happened at Manchester United. We've gone from the extreme highs and ambition and hope for the season with what you'd have to say a successful transfer window, at least on paper. But then you've seen the fallout with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, the imbalance of the team that, well, whether it's because of him or not, I guess can be debated. But since Ronaldo's come in, the imbalance of the squad, and then just looking at how Ralf Rangnick has now come in, and again, the idea and that he would bring his tactical philosophy, gegenpressing, and so forth. But United look as clueless as ever. And I think now that, in fact, you have to ask more questions than you have answers. Now you're looking at it and you're starting to wonder, yes, there's definitely a cultural problem at United. But then the other part that I've been reflecting on, and I'm keen to see what you both think, has been, did United almost get conned by Ralf Rangnick? Did they look at someone who's used to building projects at smaller clubs rather than thinking of, actually, maybe we needed an Ole Gunnar Solskjaer type who can just come in and make an instant impact for this season? Because it almost feels like in January, we're saying this season's dead.
Well, I want to go to, you mentioned Ralf Rangnick there, and he's obviously a huge part of this debate, but I just want to go to John because obviously living in Germany and sort of obviously very good knowledge of German football, regardless of what he's sort of doing, just your thoughts on Ralf Rangnick sort of maybe before he was announced, what you thought of the appointment and what that would mean for Manchester United, but also his first, what are we now, 3 or 4 weeks into his tenure at Old Trafford. Just what have you made of the whole situation around him at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, regarding Rangnick, I guess there was kind of a lot of sadness around the club with Ole's departure, and also amongst diehards, and also not so diehards, if you like. But I think we all knew that Ole's time was up. It was just a sad, reluctant kind of acknowledgement of that. So I think whenever the manager changes, really, and you kind of realise that time is done, and normally 90% of the time, fans are delighted to get rid of the manager, whoever it is, because things are that bad, and so they're almost just happy to welcome in whoever comes in. There was an element of that because of how bad things were under Ole, and obviously the terrible defeats to Liverpool and Man City just before we got fired after losing at Watford. But then. And so there was some sort of, and it was lots of, he's a foreign manager, the Germans are on vogue, and Rangnick, and et cetera, et cetera. But don't forget, this guy was a consultant at Lokomotiv Moscow, where, and this guy was coaching for 1 year out of the last 10. And this guy was coming not from Madrid, not from Barcelona, not from Juventus or AC Milan. We weren't snaring him from under the noses of any of those clubs, or even snatching him from another club, so to speak. And the other thing with Rangnick, I don't get this timeline with the Chelsea story. He pretty much soon after arriving, he was very keen to express how he was offered the Chelsea club job in February. Well, not been funny, but Lampard was sacked in December. They appointed Tuchel in January, and thank you. And he said he got offered it in February for 4 months. Well, Tuchel was appointed permanently in January. I don't get that timeline. I think there may have been some, he might have got his timeline slightly wrong, or there may have been some feelers sent out, or he may have been offered a different role at the club for a period of time. But I don't get that. Now, regarding him and his success in the game, if you like, but he's been an Avram Grant type figure, perhaps, if you like, albeit ones of longer term projects, if you like, overseeing overhauls of clubs, if you like, and also at Lokomotiv Moscow. I spoke to a friend of mine who's actually a big fan of the club, and he said, well, he's kind of a guy with a long term plan. This is 4 or 5 weeks ago when he was appointing. He's recruiting sort of randomers that we've never heard of, 17-year-olds from various leagues around the world. And this is kind of his thing. He's not a 4 to 6 months, come in and shake things up kind of guy. Or as you mentioned before, with Ollie when he came in the first place, just steady the ship, tide things over, and till we get a opponent. He's just not that kind of guy. And finally, and I am bringing it back now to Manchester, if you like, rather than the German perspective. By the way, he's very popular in Germany, and he's regarded as I'm just trying to think of a British comparison. Well, we've not really had this structure in the UK that long, where we've got a technical director and stuff. But he's regarded he's very highly regarded here, and understandably so, with his project at Leipzig. And you heard Klopp obviously praising him when he was appointed, etc. So he's well liked him, well respected, but he's not really what United have employed him for. And that's going to bring me to my final point, which is, when we look at Mr. Ed Woodward, who's mysteriously still in the role 7 days after he should have departed. If we look at the role of Ed Woodward and we look at the decisions that he's made, and you could probably very quickly write down 50 to 100 decisions, but for math's sake, we're going to say 100. The 100 decisions, there could be a book in this, by the way, and it wouldn't take you very long to write. The 100 decisions of Ed Woodward in the post-Ferguson era, if you like. And I'm serious. 95, I think you would say, were wrong, were mistakes, gross, horrendous mistakes, if you like. And probably a couple are so-so, and maybe a couple or so were successes. You could get a dog, you could get a monkey and a piece of paper, and you could just randomly get the dog to make random decisions, and and the dog would have more success than Ed Woodward.
Well, you make a lot of good points there, which I agree with, all of them. However, the one point you just made towards the end there in regards to Ralf Rangnick, sort of fantastic football brain, fantastic experience within the game. But when we're talking about Manchester United manager, that's a different kettle of fish. So, Larry, I just want to ask you the question here. And this is by no means me defending the players. I'm not defending the players at all here. Whoever the manager is, they have to show up to work and give their all. However, in these latest reports that have emerged, it's come out that they weren't happy with the appointment of Ralf Rangnick. They wanted say an Antonio Conte or a Mauricio Pochettino. Whether they're accurate reports or not, who knows? However, I just want to ask the question. I'm not defending the players, but playing devil's advocate. Do the players actually have a little bit of a point in regards to when Solskjaer was the manager? We're all saying, no, this squad is ready for a world-class manager now. This squad is ready to win now. But suddenly this manager who's come in, who maybe his job or his skills in the game don't sort of set him up for success right now. They are a lot sort of long-term future where the players are under the impression, no, Solskjaer is going to come in, or Solskjaer is going to leave, and we're going to get someone who's going to win us the league or win us the Champions League this year. So are the players kind of, it's not defending the players, but are they kind of right to be a little bit annoyed at the appointment?
I think so. I think when you look at football results, I've said this on here before, it's never all the players' fault and it's never all the manager's fault. The truth is it's always somewhere in between. But where I will criticize Rangnick, and to John's point, I think he's almost conned United. I really do. And I have to be honest, now that I think about it, and just as John was going through some of his points, I thought about it and I said, yes, he did bring up the Chelsea appointment. It's almost as if he needed to justify to the United fans why he was so highly scouted after. And the other point here is, we can see now. Look, I'm just an overweight guy on YouTube, okay? But if I can see that United's 4-2-2 system doesn't suit the likes of Bruno Fernandes, who is a central player, who relies on the movement and the pace of other players to utilize his passing ability. If I can see that Jadon Sancho is a winger and Mason Greenwood has a future as a striker, and we can all see that Marcus Rashford is a wide player, albeit he is struggling. And if we can all see that Fred and McTominay have limitations in midfield and Harry Maguire doesn't suit playing in a high-line defense, then why on earth is a manager coming in and being so stubborn about his system? You have to play with the tools you got. If I've got a loose screw, I can't put a hammer in and hope to loosen it, can I? You got to use the tools that you have. And I think the criticism I do point at Ralf Rangnick is he's trying to force a system with players he doesn't have, and he does not have the time to do that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's definite frustration. I'll just go to John on that was probably the second part of the story that emerged in regards to the players not happy with the appointment. But in regards to that not happy sort of argument, the other part of the argument was, started off yesterday was 11 players who were unhappy at Manchester United. Now, the latest report overnight was 17 players who are unhappy. Now, I don't know if the report has gone around and done a head count and asked each player where he's come up at number 17. I'm not quite sure. But as someone who has sort of spoken to people within the game and spoken to people within the club as well, just want your opinion on sort of what constitutes an unhappy player, because even successful teams, look at Ferran Torres, who was at Manchester City, wasn't happy, he left for Barcelona. Even successful teams will have unhappy players. I remember we spoke to David May on here, and he's a part of the Manchester United treble winning team. He was absolutely filthy with Ferguson for leaving him out of the Champions League final. He was unhappy in that moment. That doesn't mean he's unhappy at Manchester United. I think it's just I think that where there's smoke, there's fire. There is obviously definitely something in it. However, me being the cynic, and again, this is not me defending the players, I just don't buy this story. I think it's very sort of sensationalist. I'm sure there's unhappy players. Of course there is. You know Donny van der Beek's unhappy. You know Anthony Martial's unhappy. But I think it's a very easy story to come out and say 17 players are unhappy. So I just want your opinion on what is an unhappy player at a club, and just your thoughts on the sort of the accuracy of this news.
Tom, you're absolutely right with the no smoke without fire. That's the first thing. So there's unhappiness, there's discord, no doubt about that. But these figures of 11 unhappy players, 17, they don't really grab me in the way that I think an editor probably wants them to. And partly for some of the reasons that you were suggesting, but I'll even back that up. That'll be just some intern. Often, be some but they've got the story, okay, and they've got the guys with their contacts, and the guy there, whoever the journalist happens to be, and there's some very good journalists with very good contacts who will know what's going on at the club, and that's, by the way, another point regarding the leaks. But sometimes the last, and I have been that guy, so I know it. I've done work experience. I've done internships at newspapers in the UK. And I remember once, I'll give you an example. I remember once, I'm just an intern, okay, 2 weeks, very little experience in the game. And 2 weeks on an internship or work experience. And they asked me to come up with a figure for the Portuguese agent, the super agent, Mendes. I forget his first name. But they're asking me, okay, and they said, what do you mean, what figure? And they said, well, just give us all the figures for all the transfers he's been involved with. And I was like, what do you mean, UK transfers, or do you mean Cummings? They said, just everything. Anyway, so I'm there with a pen and paper over about a 20-minute, half an hour period, trawling through all the transfers of all the guys that I think. I said, what about this guy? Is he one of his clients? I wasn't quite sure. Is this like 10 or 11? Yeah, bump him in. Anyway, and by the way, this is a broadsheet newspaper. It's not a tabloid. Anyway, I finally got this figure of about 850 million quid's worth of transfers. Next day, front page of the sports section was $1 billion or £1 billion super agent, And I'm thinking, oh, right, that's a bit of a stretch, So now coming back to there is a very pertinent point here. There could be some intern, by the way, that's just gone, how many players do you reckon are unhappy? Well, that guy's not smiling. All right, we'll add him at the list. Yeah, he wasn't smiling when at the end of the match of the day. We've got Bruno Fernandes. He waves his hands around. So I'm a bit skeptical regarding the number. However, there is palpable discord, no doubt about that. As you say, it's no smoke without fire. I think, Larry's right. And you're right to some extent as well, Tom, with this point that you can understand the players, that actual point of, well, who is this guy? 4-2-2-2-2 or whatever it is, was a formation that you'd often employ when you sort of, you had, like Brazil would sometimes do it because they had all these sort of centrally unbelievable players, and they had two amazing fullbacks that especially were unbelievable going forward in Cafu and Roberto Carlos. So Brazil used to, and as a national team, you kind of get it. I remember England when they played the diamond in the mid-2000s under Ericsson. And I remember other national teams, because with a national team, you can't just go out and buy a right winger or a centre forward or holding midfield or whatever. So you kind of play around with the formation a bit because these are your best players. With a club, it's a bit different. You should really. I've never really seen this 4-2-2-2 thing before. Klopp does 4-3-3 pretty much. Guardiola does various different formations, and I've got no problem with innovation, by the way. I've got no problem with innovation, but has that innovative thing been taking you to Champions Leagues and Serie A's and Bundesligas? Well, in the case of Rangnick, it's clearly not.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, the point you make there on sort of journalists, or whether it be an intern or wherever, just the media in general, sort of sometimes sort of making a real stretch in terms of making a story, in terms of the way they get their information. I just want, Larry, your opinion. I discussed it on a podcast last night with a mate of mine in Ireland. Just thinking, obviously, the thumbnail for this photo is that photo of the players walking out of the tunnel where the players are walking out and Phil Jones is jumping. I'm just thinking, I think that a lot of has sort of started a lot of this story, because a lot of the players, Mason Greenwood, Luke Shaw, they have their shoulders slumped, and Phil Jones, who was the best performer on the night, is pumped up and jumping. Now, I just want to throw you my side of things. Well, if that photo was taken 2 seconds later and Phil Jones is standing on the floor after he lands his jump, and then Scott McTominay does his jump, does that change the narrative type thing? I just want your opinion on, not to exaggerate it, but how much do you think that photo has played a part in this news coming out, in terms of the way we view the news?
This is just the perception of social media, isn't it? And I have to be honest with you. I think a lot of the football fans, or if I can call them quote unquote football fans or Manchester United fans on social media, don't actually watch the 90 minutes of football. I truthfully don't believe they do. I think a lot of them watch moments and highlights, and they'll follow a big account and maybe what a big account says about a football game, and then they'll just run with that perception because they're not mature enough to form their own opinions. And I think that's a lot of the issue. But, the social media issue in football is, I think that's just a larger problem. But what I will say, and just back on the Ralf Rangnick point a little bit, it's funny that he always talks about control. And look, I think absolutely we'll go into the players. But Ralf Rangnick he used the word control constantly, almost to nauseam, when he first came into United, if you recall his first press conference. But then I almost find it a bit naive to say you're obsessed with controlling a football match, yet you're sitting with 2 midfielders. Everyone knows that if you want to control a football game, you control it through the midfield. He's almost nullified that by removing the 4-2-3-1 formation and relying on players who, let's be honest, they're inadequate. You look at Tom. We did this in the review of the last game. John, let me ask you this: German football is all about midfield domination. When you look at Fred and McTominay and Matic and Donny van de Beek, where do they rank? If you're talking about the Premier League, team 1 to team 20, where do those players rank in terms of midfields? Because if I'm being entirely honest, they don't belong in the top half. No, you're absolutely right, Larry. Regarding, this whole idea of control, if you like, you're absolutely right, Larry. I heard him say it many times. And actually, sometimes he's been compared to Klopp because of nationality, but actually sometimes he actually errs a bit towards, I know they're quite similar in many ways, but he actually errs a bit more towards Guardiola, okay, in this style, especially regarding control. And I remember Guardiola when he was at Bayern about 5 years ago, talking of Twitter. It was actually one of those things that was flying around on Twitter for a while, around the time when Guardiola went mental at all his medical staff, and I think he fired them all after about 40 years of being at the club. And that just goes to show you, by the way, just how much power he had at Bayern, that actually they just took that, despite some of these very sort of legendary, at least within the club, figures. But what I want to compare it to is there was a moment, I remember this thing with Vidal, the Chilean midfielder. And by the way, he was a reserve midfielder at Bayern largely. So that gives you an idea of how strong that midfield was. And there was a moment with him, and he didn't pass the ball forward, and he didn't pass the ball to the right person. And Guardiola, they're winning like 4-0 against, I don't know, Wolfsburg or whatever. And he's going mental on the sidelines, in classic Guardiola fashion, if you like. And I think, again, Rangnick kind of wants this style as well. He wants, forward passes to the right player, obviously possession, obviously speed, obviously making the right decision. And we saw, obviously, with that situation with De Gea, I know it's the goalkeeper, but we saw that situation with De Gea when he gets a back pass of the day. And actually, really, Luke Shaw was kind of in control of the situation, and Luke Shaw's just telling him where to go. But De Gea sort of
kind of panics, if you like, and just comes out and clears the ball. That's the kind of thing that would just send Guardiola nuts. By the way, if Guardiola had taken over at United, I'm not here to criticise De Gea. I think he's probably not even on that list of 17 people. He's actually somebody, and I know we get tired of the tweeters and stuff, but he actually tends to come out the next day with or 1 or 2 days later with nice tweets. It might be him, 10th anniversary at the club, or saying thank you to a fan, or visiting a children's hospital, something like that. He does lots of good things, but you do wonder if De Gea might have been a fall guy if somebody like Guardiola had come in 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, would have been interesting. You talk about sort of new managers, and this is definitely not us saying get Ralf Rangnick out, but just a comment here from good mate. As in, I've still got maybe 2 or 3 quick topics I want to go through. So just a quick one on this one, John. A question to you. I was never sold on him personally, but John, Rob, a good friend of ours, obviously he's a big fan of him. Even though we missed a boat, would you have taken Antonio Conte? Because obviously now you look at Tottenham. Maybe I think they lost this morning against Chelsea. Sydney time, but obviously the League Cup, you can't read too much into that. But Conte is starting to maybe get the ball rolling at Tottenham a little bit. And just thinking, even if Ralf Rangnick, the club said, okay, come in until May, and then we're definitely going to get a new manager. Well, maybe the choice could have been, well, let's have a few tough months under Antonio Conte if he's going to be the main man taking us forward. So just your thoughts on Conte and sort of United supposedly missing out on him and him taking the reins at Spurs.
I think this Conte thing is very interesting because the timing, obviously, of the two clubs kind of, needing a new manager. A little bit like with the Manchester situation, I say Manchester intentionally with 2016 when Mourinho and Guardiola both came in to their respective Manchester clubs, and therefore you were just looking at direct comparison. And anyway, great question, Robert, regarding Conte. I think there's kind of two parts to this. I think he is kind of the impact man. He's honoured, by the way, right now. His stock is much higher than someone like Mourinho. I heard lots of people make comparisons to Mourinho just because of the hyperactivity and sometimes how things kind of unravel after 2 or 3 years. And he isn't. And what is going on at Spurs, it does not surprise me. At last night's result aside, coming in and making that instant impact, which therefore also makes alive, certain coaches need time, and I'm okay with that. When you're in the bottom of the table, when Ferguson takes over in '86, and there's so many things rotten at the club, and this is a very different situation to today regarding the youth structure. I get it, but that's mid '80s. Let's talk about today. You can come in and make an instant impact. By the way, we're in the middle of a new manager bounce. So I'd hate to think what the fall will be like. And regarding Conte, though, regarding that so specifically, he would have come in and he would have had a better instant impact than Ralf Rangnick, no doubt. The only thing is that I think most of us, and the club included, want a sort of a longer term thing. They want a guy to come in who's focused on youth, who will put certain things in place that will bring young players through, will scout young talent and have the right people alongside him to do so, i.e. Pochettino, given what he's done at various clubs, including Southampton in particular, less so probably Paris Saint-Germain, and Spurs, of course. Or, of course, the obvious one for me is Ten Hag from Ajax. These are the two sort of, I would be very happy with both of those. Now, I think the issue with Conte is he's not going to take an interim job. And therefore, United have a decision. Do we go for this guy for the longish term and have that immediate impact? Let's see what happens at Spurs. But generally, he has a very good impact for 6 to 12 months. And that may, by the way, take you to a league title as it did at Chelsea and also at Inter as well. Or do you go for what we did? And I understand why we did what we did. And I have to say that I probably would just go on that side. But is Conte a better coach than Ralf Rangnick? Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, look, it's a debate I think we'll be having in a couple of months' time when sort of Ralf Rangnick's his time potentially comes to an end at United. And we're going to be having a managerial debate. Antonio Conte probably won't be in that discussion. But with Spurs, you never know. Who knows how the next couple of weeks will go there. He could be up for available. But I'll just throw this quickly to Larry. Mads brought up here. The issue falls on the players, 100%, not the board, not the owners, not the manager. The current state of this side is 100% on the players and no one else, which is, I can understand that. And during a match, that is my feelings 100%. I completely agree with that. However, it's the reason why I always look back at Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Yes, I do understand he needed to go, but why I always sat back and said, okay, sack the manager. It's not really going to change anything. But however, the reason I do blame it all on the players when the performances go bad. However, that stems from the top layer, that stems from the owners, that stems from the board, and that trickles down to the manager, that trickles down to the players. And I just think you look at the situation we've been in when Moyes got sacked, when Mourinho got sacked, when Van Gaal, when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer got sacked, different managers, different players, we all end up in the same situation. There's one constant, and that's the people upstairs. So just it's a big topic, but just on that sort of where the issue does lie.
It's a difficult one. I think United have definitely spent a lot of money. So if I'm being honest, that's the one argument I don't buy into. I think the Glazers, I don't think Avram and Joel Glazer are sitting there telling Ole Gunnar Solskjaer or Louis van Gaal, telling them to sign Fred or so forth. I simply think they're giving a budget. They're giving it to Ed Woodward to basically control the reins. Ed Woodward is the one I actually put a lot of the blame on for all of United's success or lack thereof. And the thing is, if you can talk about this season, I can answer in multiple ways for you. If someone says to you, what's wrong with United this season? I could say Ole Gunnar Solskjaer lost control of the player balance. But then I could also say to you, United failed to bring in a midfielder when we clearly needed one and signed Cristiano Ronaldo. Was there a need for Cristiano Ronaldo? I mean, he's our leading goal scorer. We probably wouldn't be in the group stages of the knockout stages of the Champions League without him. But did United need him? Jury's still out. There are so many reasons why you can argue why United are in the situation they're in. Yes, we are struggling because of the players there, but at the end of the day, McTominay and Fred can't control a midfield. So whether we put Fred and McTominay there, or we put Matic there, you can't ask a player to do something that they're just not capable of doing. If I tell Wan-Bissaka to play like João Cancelo at Manchester City, it's just not going to happen because he doesn't have the capability to do it. So yes, there's the side of, yes, the players should be better and they should do better and they should put in 100%, like Marcus Rashford, brushing his shoulders across instead of putting an effort in. Yeah, those are the things that you can put at the players. But I also have to say, at the management, are you setting up the team for success? In terms of Ed Woodward, are you buying the players that the previous managers have needed so the squad could kick on? There are so many factors. I think it's always a little bit of everyone. You can never say it's just the players or it's just the manager.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. I think when frustration is high, we not lash out, but we sort of direct our anger at something to sort of, okay, it's their fault, it's their fault. And I think that's just a natural sort of human reaction type thing. But it definitely does feel like that. And if everyone in the live chat, if you could remember, there are a few in here, please do leave a like on the video. That would be great. But we do appreciate all the comments flying in. But just one more sort of topic and sort of discussion. Just want quickly with you, John, before we do wrap up. In regards to the dressing room leaks, and I thought the leaks had finished when all those memes going around. It was the Old Trafford roof that was leaking. So there was all these memes coming out, but now the leaks have started to re-emerge from the change room. And I'm just thinking, look, we can dissect and say, okay, who's leaking it and why they're leaking it. But I'm just thinking, as someone who's spoken to people within the game, and obviously as again people at the club over the years, I'm just thinking we know who the unhappy players are, type thing. But let's just pinpoint, okay, this is the unhappy player. Why is he? What's his motive behind leaking something? Like, what's he getting out of it? Is he leaking something to undermine the manager, or does he want to move? Like, is it based from his agent? His agent saying let this information out, type thing. I just think, what's the motive behind a player leaking this sort of news behind the scenes?
Well, I think having a favourable relationship with the media or a journalist in particular, but often journalists will not do you any harm. Let's say that side of things. It might be. I know, for example, John Terry had an unbelievable relationship with Martin Samuel. I'm talking about British journalists here, and apologies to the global audience that we may have, but these are key relationships, if you like, in football. Steven Gerrard had an unbelievable relationship with Henry Winter in particular, and often the journalist obviously loves it because they get the info and they may get an autobiography, a lucrative autobiography deal years down the line. But even from the players' side of you, when things are all kicking off with John Terry 10 years ago, the Times, which I think is where Martin Samuel was at the time, and then obviously latterly Daily Mail, you would never get a bad thing said about him. And these things do have an impact. We know all about the media and how things work, and also social media as well. So that's the side of it. And by the way, it might just be gossip in general. I mean, we have gossip at work and we have gossip in all of our lives, if you like. And sometimes to let off that steam can also be a good thing. And having a favourable relationship with journalists will continue. And by the way, it could also be an agent involved. It could also be the guys looking for a move. It could be all sorts of different things going on. So it can work, and it obviously does work both ways. Regarding the leaks from the dressing room, etc., this has been a thing at United now for actually that even predates Ferguson. I remember in the last 2 or 3 years of the Ferguson era, they were just, I mean, it's much worse now, but of course the performances on the pitch are. But even towards the end of the Ferguson, it was like, how is this getting in the media? And even Ferguson sort of would question at times. And the leaks in the dressing room. But this is more than 10 years ago. So these are obviously different people at the club that are still continuing to do so. I mean, who these leaks are right now, I honestly I wouldn't have a clue. My guess is obviously these are good English speakers, etc. If you like, and maybe even native English speakers. But I mean, we're talking about Martial and players like that who are known for not really speaking much English, and yet we know all about his discontent. Well, probably not that difficult to work out, and it's probably not that difficult to find out either.
Well, just want to, completely agree, but just go to Larry in regards to that. Okay, we even saw snippets of this sort of come out under Ferguson. So we think this is a new thing because of bad management or whatever. No, this thing happens at workplaces. This thing happened under the greatest manager of all time at times. I'm just thinking, do we just have to bite the bullet and just accept this is a part of the game and there's going to be leaks? Even if we're winning Premier Leagues and Champions Leagues, the unhappy players are going to be leaking stuff and this stuff is going to get out? Or is there something that sort of can be done to prevent this? Could you get a new strong manager in who can close up shop around the training ground and sort of weed this out? Or is this just the modern game and the world we live in?
Well, no, I don't think it's the modern game in the way we live in, because you don't see the sort of leaks that come out of United, coming out of Manchester City, or even Chelsea. I mean, if Lukaku didn't have such a big gob, nothing would come out of Chelsea. Hell, Tuchel didn't even know Lukaku was upset. So there you go. And it just goes to show that there is something culturally wrong at United. And I think that this cultural issue has been there even during Ollie's time. And a lot of the commentary that has come out has been that Solskjaer very much was being friends with the players, which I don't think necessarily is a bad thing. But I think you need to be able to draw the line. And I think Ferguson was so successful because he found a way to put an arm around a player without necessarily, but he was more of a father figure rather than someone trying to be the friend. And I think that's the fine line that Ollie tread on. It's a really difficult one. I think with the right manager and with success, the culture changes. But United are in this never-ending cycle of getting close to success. And to be honest, we are getting closer. And I still maintain the fact, and I have to ask both of you this, because if you said at the start of this season, Ronaldo comes in, and I hate to think it's just because we signed Ronaldo, but I look at that United side, and I still maintain that they're only 2 or 3 signings away from really challenging for a title. And I feel like this is where I'm really concerned by the Ralf Rangnick appointment. I feel like he's come in, he has his philosophy and his ideas, and I think because he's so fixated in what he envisions football to be, that he's almost creating this illusion that there is a need for a rebuild. I really don't think that there is. I think if you can just tweak what we have, bring in 1 or 2 quality midfielders, and yes, probably you do need to drop Harry Maguire. I'm at that point where United have evolved as a football side. I just don't think you can play a high line and play Harry Maguire. I just don't think that works. But if you got a good right back, if you got 1 or 2 good midfielders, tell me how that side struggles to challenge for the title. It is good enough. It is absolutely good enough. It's just about a manager who's not going to be who's tactically flexible, but also has the intelligence to utilize what he has, as opposed to being so fixated on what he perceives as how football should be. And I think if United win, I'm telling you, there's no cultural issue. Did you hear all these leaks about the players being unhappy 6 months ago? When you're not successful, the culture's miserable. When you're winning, there's no problem. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think it's hard to. You're completely right, but just look at everyone. Ronaldo's the problem. Everyone hates Ronaldo this week. They didn't hate him when 10 players went over and did the Ronaldo celebration against Burnley type thing. I think we do need to sort of take a step back and sort of look at the bigger picture. Before just one last topic, John, before we sort of wrap up the pod, and I'll ask John first, but then direct it towards Larry. I'm just thinking we all sit here as fans, and it's in the title of the thumbnail saying, if you don't want to be here as a player, leave. We all say that. If you want, not happy, leave. Go find another club. That's fine. No issue if you do want to leave. A lot of players do. Go. It's very hard to do that, especially when a player is collecting a big wage, and obviously the football transfer, maybe Donny van de Beek wants to leave and the club do want to keep him. So I understand there are complexities with a player wanting to leave or not able to leave, etc. But just your thoughts on when a fan does say that. Anthony Martial, you don't want to be here. Donny van de Beek, you don't want to be here. Leave. How realistic is that as a fan? And could it be as simple as that one day where a club or a player would just get up and go, or it's just the money in the game and the contractual situations just make that almost an impossibility?
I mean, Ferguson, we mustn't go on too much about him, but I mean, his idea on a couple of these points, basically, first of all, was to cut out the cancer. But of course, Ferguson was referring to 1 or 2 people in the dressing room, if you like. because we're looking at a largely successful side that just needs tweaking. And when he says cut out the cancer, he means like that one or two individuals that are causing issues, that are not happy, etc. Put them in the reserves, sell them as soon as possible. When it's en masse, and irrespective of the number, whether it be 11 or 17 or 7, it's obviously a bit trickier to do. And of course, again, this comes back to Ed Woodward, the unbelievable contracts that we suddenly start handing out. I mean, Juan Mata, by the way, is not a problem. I mean, he's almost certainly not one of the, even, you could be 37 players unhappy at the club and you're still thinking Juan Mata's fine, even though he's probably only played 5 minutes in the last 5 years. But I still don't quite understand why he was given another contract other than to be a cheerleader on the side of the. And I like the guy, and he's a smart guy, and there's probably a role for him at the club at long term if he wants it. But I don't know why he was. Never mind the other contracts. And by the way, I was as delighted as anyone to see Phil Jones have a fairly trouble-free 90 minutes. And as you said, he's one of the better players on the night, definitely. Certainly one of the people who you couldn't criticize. And every time the ball went near him, you're just hoping he wouldn't make a mistake. And thankfully, he didn't. I know maybe some people might pick him up for the goal, but there were certain other issues that went on as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I largely agree with what I mean. The difference, though, by the way, to the Ferguson era, this is a difference, and it's actually a positive, and maybe the only positive right now is actually there is no one indispensable at the club. There is no one that you're like, oh, I don't want this guy to go. Please don't go. There's none of those 30, 40 first team players who, if we sold them in January, when I think it'll be very difficult to do so, or if we sold them or didn't renew their contract in the summer, there's none of them that you go, oh, maybe Cavani, maybe. It'd be kind of sorry to see him go, but you'd understand if he wants to go because he wants first team football. There's none of them. Whereas when Ferguson was in charge, and it was like Ronaldo was suggesting and flutting his eyes at Madrid and stuff, and even then, by the way, Ferguson famously said, "I'll put him in the reserves, no problem." And then you had Sepp Blatter saying, "This guy who's on at the time £200,000 a week," comparing him to slavery, which was insane. But so there's no one that, in my opinion, that's indispensable, and I understand the fan sentiment. I have the similar sentiment myself. If you want to go. But as we all know, you £300,000 a week contracts. But yeah, just this. The thing is, at United right now, we have players who could potentially step in. I must say that I'm not one of the on the Van der Beek bandwagon like many people are. I think we've now seen 2, arguably 3 first-team coaches with Michael Carrick have all basically not think this guy's good enough, or he's not applying himself enough, certainly in training, to be in the first team. So I'm not someone who's saying bring Van der Beek in and it all will be well. But we've got 4 fullbacks who I think only one, and that's Luke Shaw, really are at the level that we need them to be at. And Luke Shaw's got issues regarding confidence and regarding also application. I think it was interesting that his interview, by the way, I think the most interesting part of the interview, and something not everyone has picked up on, they've often picked up on other elements of the interview, was actually a line he made right at the end, which was about maybe the coach knows what to do or something like that. I mean, basically, he's saying we don't think he knows what he's doing, and we don't really believe it. Maybe he's got a solution to the problem, or words to that effect. The key word being maybe. But Luke Shaw, though, is the guy regarding those 4 fullbacks who actually does. We've seen his ceiling is here, if you like. The other 3 fullbacks' ceiling is there. So even though Luke Shaw may be at their level right now, or maybe even lower at times, that performance against Liverpool amongst others was terrible. He's fine. Again, regarding Ronaldo, I was like everyone else, was so excited with the euphoria of the last minute sort of, switch, if you like, or at least how the media played it out of how he was going to go to Man City and then ultimately United. I'm not, he's not top of my list of this is a problem at United right now. Probably top of my list is Ed Woodward and so many structural issues. But then in terms of the first team, even the first team, he's not the first thing I think that's an issue. I think the midfield is the issue. But of course, then that brings us back to Larry's point about last summer's purchases. I was surprised to see Ronaldo linked to Man City, actually, because I didn't see him being a Guardiola kind of signing or Guardiola type player. However, Guardiola has 30 of his own players and was desperate for a striker, and so so be it. But we've got so many other issues at the club that I'm less worried about Ronaldo. I know some people in the media in particular have gone down that route, though.
Yeah, no, they're definitely hanging Ronaldo up there, and I think a lot of fans are. And there's definite issues around sort of Ronaldo's arrival, both off the field and on the field. But yes, that there are plenty of bigger issues. I think we can enjoy Ronaldo for what he is for the time being. I think just enjoy it and focus on the real issues at hand. But Larry, just to wrap up, just that last point which I made in sort of, yes, it's impossible. Just a player's just not going to get up and go. But if you're the manager and you understand a player's not happy, let's say that's a Donny van der Beek. What do you do as a manager? Do you just literally sit him on the bench and he's unhappy around the training ground? Are you doing what Sir Alex Ferguson threatened at times, put a player in the reserves? Or if a player's worth £50 million, are you saying, hang on, I'll sell you for £5 million just to get rid of you? Like, how, as a manager, how are you dealing with these unhappy players who just don't want to be there?
Look, football is a business. It's too easy to sit here and say, if you don't want to be here, go. Like, there's a reason these players are on these stupid contracts. It's because there's a value and they are an asset to the club. Whether that's right or wrong, now, obviously, we all agree Phil Jones shouldn't be a Manchester United player anymore. But it's on United for offering this guy north of £100,000 per week, when no other club would even offer anywhere near that. So, United have made countless mistakes. And because of the wages that United pay, it makes it very difficult to say, if you're not happy here, leave. But then it comes back to the cultural side. So what you said there, if you have a player who's not putting in training, or if we know that these leaks that are coming out, it has to be, it's one or two things. It's a player who's at the club who doesn't want to be at the club, or it's they don't want the manager there. I think if Ralf Rangnick really wanted to go digging, I'm sure he could find pretty quickly who the player or players are.
He needs to get Colleen Rooney in there.
I don't think it, but you know what? I know this almost sounds outrageous. You look at what Wayne Rooney's doing with Derby. That's all spirit. That's all heart. You can't help but wonder what if he came in on an interim basis, the sort of impact he'd have on this squad. But anyway, let's not fantasize too much. And I think with Ralf Rangnick, what he needs to be mindful of is he's in a very awkward position at the moment, because we've heard that he's going to be there for a 2-year period. I'm not convinced. I think if the results continue the way they are, I don't think the German will be at the club beyond the summer. And then you have to look at it then, if he needs to get a tune out of these players, and I think every manager needs to do this. If there is a cultural issue, or that someone's not putting in training, or someone is being toxic, or is a quote unquote leader in the dressing room, but they're setting the wrong set of behaviors, then yes, there has to be an element of, maybe I do need to put him in the reserves. Maybe I do banish them from the team. Because if you've got someone who is a bad influence, or as John said, who is a cancer, and you've got younger players looking up, if Mason Greenwood looks up to Edinson Cavani, and Edinson Cavani is every day in Mason's ear saying, oh, look at this manager, he's an idiot, he doesn't know what he's doing, look at us trying to make us press, we want to play beautiful silky football. What do you think that does for Mason Greenwood? He's 20 years of age. He's going to listen to the mentor in the dressing room. So that's something that Ralf Rangnick needs to be careful of. There's no perfect solution for this. I'm truthfully of the belief, and I want to ask both of you this, have United made a mistake with Ralf Rangnick? Was he the wrong appointment? And has United almost made a bigger mess by appointing him as the interim manager?
Look, it's hard. Look, that is a debate for another day, and there's still a few days without football until United return, which I think we can dissect. But I'll just, maybe, John, you can have the last word on that before we wrap up. Just on that, look, it is a long answer type thing, and we don't know the answer. He might win us an FA Cup, and we think, and build him a statue outside Old Trafford type thing in a few months' time. That things might change. But just on the outlook and sort of what is happening and the foreseeable future, is it a mistake with Ralf Rangnick, or it is what it is for now, and we're going to sort of cross another hurdle in May?
I mean, I guess this is sitting on the fence somewhat. The jury's out. That's what I would say to that in short. I guess the targets for this season, they were that way when he came in, and even more desperately so now, apparent, if you like, is top 4. That's the immediate, target. If we finish 4th, Ralf Rangnick continues in his consultancy role, and we go, you know what? Let's see how the next 5 years go with the next coach, etc., and the whole thing. But at least regarding Rangnick's sort of short-term thing, and honestly, I don't think even now, despite these really bad results that we've been having, and by the way, really bad, it's because Rangnick came in and we had that unbelievable run in front of us. We've just lost to Watford, of course, but we had all these sort of easy-ish games with teams in the bottom half of the table, and we've not picked up the results. And we've also, and this is probably the most important thing, we've played really badly. So I know I heard people say to me, and that's fair enough, results we need more than anything else right now. And that's true. But actually, results and performances go hand in hand. If you play badly constantly for 6 weeks, it's not sustainable. You might get results, but it's not sustainable. And in fact, in a way, the Solskjaer initial period when he came in with that sort of 10 winning, there were some games in there. I remember playing Spurs away where we were just horrendous and De Gea, pulling off worldies all the time. And we managed to win. So performances do matter. And so right now we're not getting either. But just to quickly bring it back to the sort of Rangnick, I'm going to sit on the fence. And if he gets us top 4, then fine, And who's to say we could still knock out Atletico Madrid? They're not exactly in rude health right now. I know they got 1 or 2 injuries. But by Simeone's standards, by the way, notice how I nearly said Conte there. I was thinking of Conte and Simeone. By Simeone's standards, they are struggling too in many respects. And I think they're about 4th in La Liga. And who knows what state of play will be in about 6 weeks' time when we play that first leg. Who's to say we couldn't do some sort of get a lucky quarterfinal and make the semi-finals of the Champions League? I know there's no evidence for that right now, but there's no evidence for that because
John, I've played that scenario through my head 100 times. I'm doing it every day.
We do that.
I've convinced myself we're on a Champions League run. I've convinced myself.
And we think that terrible Chelsea team in 2012 that won the Champions League, and in fact, if we think we're bad, we're not as bad as that team, in my opinion. But so you do that, and you do that with the league table too, and you think, Man City drop Liverpool, but so the jury's out. I know I've said it twice before and I'll repeat it again, and I'm sitting on the fence because it's all out where we finish at the end of the season. If we get Champions League football next season, okay, great, Rangnick, off you go and do your consultancy. In comes hopefully Ten Hag or Pochettino, and we hope again.
No, very well said. And just that point you make, and I'll just wrap up on it. And I was speaking to Ahmad at the pub watching the Burnley game, and you make a good point regarding performances. And we're sort of convinced ourselves over the last 10 years saying, although the performances don't matter if you get a result, it's a sign of a sign of a champion team if you get a result when you perform badly. We've been doing that for 5 years, 5, 6, 7 years type thing. Manchester City don't have those performances where they nick out a 1-0. Obviously, they do over the course of the season, but it's a very rare occasion where it's us every second week. We're saying, oh, it's okay. At least we got the result. The performances will improve. The performances haven't improved.
Yeah,
so,
I mean...
go on, John. Just wrap it up for us.
The thing is, even under Ferguson, you would have those 1 or 2 games every now and again where you win 1-0 and you play terribly. But that would be in the midst of, 8 really good performances. And then you get one like that and you're like, okay, that's fine. You sneak a win. But sorry, Tom.
No, perfectly well said. Larry, you going to wrap up for us?
The best football we had this season was under Michael Carrick. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah, fair comment.
Well, it'd be interesting what he does. Obviously, he's pictured with that Sir Alex Ferguson at lunch the other day, and you look at what Kieran McKenna's done. He's obviously gone to Ipswich and got a full-time job since he's left. So I assume in the next couple of months, Carrick will line up somewhere, and you have to wish him well. And he goes down in Manchester United history as, would he win all these games? Or would he have one draw in there? One draw. So undefeated as Manchester United manager. So I thought the criticism Michael Carrick got was way over the top. I've got nothing but love for him. I think he's a great player, and he did well as a coach and manager, in my opinion. Results maybe don't show that at times, but you do have to give credit where it is due. But always a pleasure seeing you, Larry, but especially John. We truly appreciate your time, early morning, early start for you over in Germany, but we do appreciate, I know everyone in the chat really enjoyed that. Just Josh here, good mate of ours, saying quality pods, lads. We truly appreciate everyone in the live chat. A lot of interaction today, which was great. If you can like the video, that would be great. Please go follow John on Twitter. We'll leave all the stuff in the descriptions, and you can follow us on Twitter, and all these details will be there. And any more books, John? Obviously, you're on the podcast. It's probably about a year ago in terms of we'll talk about the book Even the Defeats type thing, but just your latest little project, or there it is, Even the Defeats. Just give us a little, the viewers, just a little sort of review of sort of what it is about. We obviously did have a podcast about it a while ago, but just a bit of a recap for anyone tuning in who's new.
Yeah, I don't have a book in the pipeline. I mean, I tend to focus nowadays in journalism more on the news side than the sports side. I actually do have a book in mind, but it's nothing to do with football. But we'll see if that ever comes to fruition. But I also want to talk about the channel as a whole, and I'm looking at the comments and stuff. And what a very cordial, friendly bunch you have on that. I mean, I work on, occasionally appear on other podcasts too, and I often appear on one about tennis, by the way. And you would think that tennis is a far more cordial sport than football. But the comments, my goodness me, if you say one negative, and by the way, this is before the last 24 hours and all the rest of it. If you just said, oh, I thought Djokovic didn't play very well today. Oh my goodness me, the Serbians and the Balkan people in the chat would be just going mental, and all sorts of words, and people are falling out with each other. And so compared to that, there's some very, very nice, very cordial, very friendly comments I'm seeing in the chat. So it's a great. By the way, and I also love this setup with the bar that you've got on your green screen thing, if you like. With please order here.
Well, as you know, obviously the United Pubcast, when we did start this, we started every week. We sat down at the pub with an iPhone in the middle of the table and recorded all our episodes at the pub. We actually did one last week against Burnley. We put the camera down on the pub and sat down and sort of reviewed the match. But hopefully when, not that COVID's ever going to end, but when we get a little bit more normality and sort of flexibility of going out and sort of enjoying a drink and watching United, Larry and I will definitely return to the pub. But we do appreciate those words about people in the live chat. And Larry and I always sort of talk about that. It is good because we do see these big channels, and especially in the Man United community, it is a dangerous area to sort of wet your toes type thing. It's a lot of negativity and toxicity. But Larry, always a pleasure, mate. You got a little bit of work to do after this, I assume?
I do. Hopefully by the time we're in a pub recording time, I can fit into my jeans, because I tell you, all these lockdowns have not been friendly to my waistline. But I'll aim to not be in sweatpants by the time I get to the pub with you.
Where are you guys are in Sydney, right? The pubs are open?
Everything's open. Restrictions are maybe starting to come back in, but everything's pretty much normal now. But we're getting... What was the case today, Larry? It was 30,000 cases in Sydney or something. I forget what it is. I've lost track of it. But hopefully the Novak Djokovic news is something to sort of distract us all a little bit.
What's that about, Thomas? Something happened with him? Did he win a tennis match or something?
Yeah, I'm not sure he'll be playing tennis anytime soon. But Matt here saying, great show, gents. Thanks for coming on, John. We truly appreciate it. As I said, everyone in the live chat, if you could leave a like on the video, that would be great. If you could share this chat on Twitter or Facebook with any Reds you think might need a little bit of United therapy, that would be good. But I'm definitely get John on again soon. Hopefully, maybe after a Man United win or a little bit more positivity to get a little bit of different outlook. But Larry, as always, we'll chat to you. I don't know. It's a while to United play. I think we're in the FA Cup next Tuesday morning Sydney time, so I'm sure we'll get another episode out by the time that comes around. But as I said, really do appreciate your time, John. Larry, as always, and until then, we'll chat to everyone soon. Cheers.
Pleasure, gents. Cheers.